This week, we have an interview with the CEO of Sandfly Security. It's an incredible interview. You're not going to want to miss it. We talked about a lot of cool stuff with cybersecurity, AI, and so much more. And, there's so much to talk about. You're just going to have to just sit back and relax and enjoy the massive amount of content we have, because this
I
is
learned so much during this episode.
This is an awesome thing.
There's fantastic.
No, we could probably make a video out of every single question, because all of his answers were just so fascinating.
By the way, whoever wrote those questions was a freaking genius.
I mean, I would not say that necessarily, because it was Ryan, but I agree. I just won't say it. Just
good, as long as you agree, but don't say it. Yeah,
exactly. Welcome to Destination Linux, where we discuss the latest news, hot topics, gaming, mobile, and all things open source and Linux. My name is Michael, and with me are the dark magic mages casting firewalls to protect their data, Ryan and Jill.
Fireball.
Magic missile.
This episode is going to have plenty of cybersecurity magic to discuss.
Look, I am so excited this week as someone studying the dark arts of cybersecurity. This episode is epic, and anybody interested in security at all, wanting to know what's going on, how to get into a career in security, epic hacks that have happened, everything is covered in this episode. Truly one of my favorites. You're going to love it.
We also have our community feedback to cover this week and so much more. So check it out. This new episode of Destination Linux with Ryan. As you can tell, he's back. So we can get this show on the road toward Destination Linux.
So, Michael, I wasn't here last week, but I cannot wait to listen to last week's episode, because Jill talks about all the work she did in Hollywood with Linux. So I am going to absolutely sit back and enjoy that episode. So if you missed it with me, you want to check that one out. But also I heard TWIL is a 300th episode.
That's right.
Yeah.
This week in Linux.
This week in Linux, TWIL. So the live stream, when this comes out, if you're a patron, you might be able to watch it. But if this will come out after the live stream, so you can watch the latest episode that's going to have the celebration stuff in it, and it'll be already available right now. So check it out, thisweekinlinux.com/300. I don't know what we're doing, because I haven't decided yet, and we're recording this before that.
Well, of course you haven't decided yet, because you do things last minute. He will decide 1 minute before he hits record, and it will probably just be a graphic with a little balloon on it or something. And that
is ridiculous. It'll be 7 minutes, and it'll be 2 graphics.
2 balloons.
2 balloons.
First of all, I wanted to tell people, because I saw somebody in the comment section this week in Discord go, hey, did you know that the other hosts have their own little shows on YouTube and stuff they do? So, yes, Michael has done an incredible show and does also tons of other videos called This Week in Linux, where you just get the news. So it's a fantastic compliment to our other shows on the network. Because
thank you so much.
If you're wanting to know what's going on in the world of Linux, he covers all of the news topics that matter that week, every single week. And the one thing I want to tell people about this is you don't know how much work goes into that show. Michael and I have spent so many hours over the years talking about the content of that show, changing, formats for that show, making that show a new show as engaging as possible. Michael puts a ton of work writing each of those news stories, because it's not like you just go on Google News and type Linux and read stuff off. Like, you got to find stuff that's actually interesting to people. Then you have to talk about it in a way that's interesting. Then you have to edit this stuff and put graphics in and all of that. And we didn't have an editor forever. So that was all manually done. And Michael did all that work himself and all of these things. So to do 300,
still doing all that stuff myself now too.
To do 300 episodes is insane. And I don't say it often, because that would just break character for me. But congratulations on the incredible.
And it would be too much for my ego, to boost it.
It's way too much for your ego. But it really is a huge accomplishment, and we're super proud of you. I'm super proud of you. And that's the last time you'll hear that until episode 1000. So
What about 400 or 420?
No. Now you got after 300, it's 1,000 is the next mile marker.
That's a big jump. What about 500 at least?
Maybe
500. Yeah, that's special.
Maybe
that's good.
You might get a compliment again 200 more episodes from now. All right, so
I can look forward to that. I'm so happy.
Yeah,
Aw.
our feedback this week comes from Stahl, STAL. They have this to say: Hi, Jill, Michael, and Ryan, alphabetically. Well done. Look at that. I don't play favorites, and I love you all equally.
Aw.
That, first of all, that's never been said before.
Yeah, that's a first.
I don't know if Stahl's being honest with us because everyone loves Jill the most out of
And Jill is first on the list.
Yeah.
Just technically alphabetical, I guess.
Yeah,
Aw.
but no, doesn't play favorites. Love you all equally. Thank you for that. DL would not be the same if any of you are missing. My gosh, did we write this to ourselves or something? Because this
Feels
is
like it.
yeah, it feels like it. Thank you for saying that. I've been listening to the show for a couple years now, and what I appreciated throughout that time is the chemistry between you guys, despite of how different you are. Michael doesn't care about up to date as long as he can enjoy the best KDE plasma experience. Fact.
That's pretty much
Absolutely
true. I have been updating much more
Don't
recently.
stop, Mike. Stop.
I have been.
Lies.
I have been. However, I also have 2 other installs that are not. So it's still true.
Still true. Ryan seems to care so little about the desktop environment to the point he just uses whatever default is placed in front of him as long as it's up to date. See? Facts.
That is 100% Ryan.
I mean, the only part that's not true is I do change the wallpaper. So I leave everything default, but the wallpaper has to be a Batman wallpaper. So if you're ever breaking into my machine and you're wondering, did I get into DOS Geek's machine? Your clues will be default desktop with a Batman wallpaper. Then you're probably in my machine.
That's
There
not
are
much
times-
customization.
Yeah. There are times where he set up a new distro right before the show, and I was like, "Did you get time for the Batman wallpaper?"
Yeah, I remember that.
The only important part, you know?
Yeah, the important part.
Jill probably uses everything under the sun and knows how to shine a positive light on any use case. And
That's awesome.
is very
This person has definitely been paying attention because this
So
is
you've
all
seen
facts.
Jill after show. After show, Jill yells at us a lot. Like she's like, she says, "Don't you ever tell a stupid joke like that again, and you better be more professional and all that." You don't see the after show Jill. It's harsh.
We call Jill. We on the show we refer to her as Jill. On the in the after show we just refer to her as Savage.
Oh,
yeah, Savage. We're teasing Jill. We're lying. We're sorry. Now I feel bad.
You know, we got a community feedback from somebody saying y'all should be nicer to Jill. Like, what are you talking about? We love Jill. We're constantly like kind of like glazing on Jill all the time, and you know, like
we have to give her a hard time sometimes. No, she really is this nice outside of the show and in the show. And I don't know. I think she's from another planet. I'm very convinced that she's not from Earth because no human is this kind and nice and happy all the time. So
yeah, if you think that it's not possible, Jill, which we thought as well, it is, and Jill is proof.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aww.
So it is proof aliens invaded, though. Also, so you're on the fence about that.
She also did like the ET Atari game, so you know.
Yeah,
they're really nice aliens. They're not the evil ones, you know.
Yeah,
happy, joyful.
That's like the best kind of invasion ever.
Yeah. We're glad you invaded our planet, Jill. And you're all just having a good time with Linux and open source without making any, or at least no serious judgments on each other. Well, we just ruined that. Ah, dang it. The one episode where we make judgments on each other, and then he's got the comment there.
To be fair, we're making judgments on each other that are not real, and we don't mean them whatsoever.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. It's all in fun.
And you also just complimented me before this, so you know
that didn't happen. Wendy, edit that.
I have recording. I'm gonna make like an animated frame, so I can put like a digital thing.
It goes on to say, "Thank you for keeping it up all these years with and without sponsors. I don't like driving, but when I notice a new episode of my podcast app, I look forward to my commute home. That means a lot to us. I'll sit behind the wheel with a smile and sometimes have to laugh out loud in the middle of traffic."
I love incredible. That. I love that because it's. I've actually listened to our own show, and it sounds. I have to do QA to make sure that the edits are right and everything. So I also listen to every episode, and the amount of times that I've found myself laughing at what our bantering or whatever we're doing is countless. So
you know what's embarrassing, Michael, is I listen to the show for QA course purposes only, and sometimes I'll be laughing.
You don't even do the QA because you don't tell me
Shut
what
up,
you.
Michael. Sometimes I'll be laughing, at things that we say in the show because I forget, after the show and things.
Yeah.
And my wife will walk in on me and she's like, "What are you laughing at?" And the embarrassment of having to show her my own videos, of like I'm laughing at my own stuff, and the look she gives me of like, "Really? You're that arrogant?" I'm like, "No, it's like what Michael said, or what Jill said." And they're like, "Yeah, sure. You're just listening to yourself sitting there laughing."
The best part is that. So I have pretty much the same experience. My girlfriend and I were sometimes sitting on the couch and I have to do the QA. And there's been times where I've literally laughed at what I said and then be like, "Hey, check this out. This was so funny. You should watch this too."
Oh, man.
I do run the shows for my hubby. He's really good and he'll go and watch them. But if he hasn't, I go, honey, you got to see this part.
We
We're
enjoy
so
making
good at this
show,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you enjoy listening to the show. And we're thankful for everybody who's listened for so long from 190 countries. 190 countries. I can't name but 20, but 190 countries out there listen to this show regularly, and it's
I have
insane.
looked at the data for related to all these different countries. I also can't name them all.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's awesome.
And,
The fact that we have so many people from so many places enjoying the content. And I was actually going through a list of like all the feedback we've had because I was making a category of organizing stuff today. And the amount of emails we've gotten over the years of people saying how they love our show, it's their favorite and stuff. It actually kind of got me a little teary up a little bit to see like all that stuff.
Oh,
and,
you don't even have a heart and you got teared up? That's incredible.
I mean, I have tear ducts. I don't need a heart to have tear ducts.
Oh, fair. So they go on to say, if you're starved for topics and want to cover something not AI related, I think that's a hint there.
It might be. They might be suggesting that we cover something AI related.
AI is just so exciting.
Oh, other than okay.
I may have a suggestion for an episode. Subject Open Mandriva. Full disclosure, I don't run it myself yet. So why? It has roots. I'm not going to read everything here because they went into full detail and time. But it has its roots in Mandrake, which is one of the first desktop-focused Linux distros. It features KDE Plasma as the flagship variant. So there you go, Michael. And some background information is they never hear anyone mention Mandrake's derivatives, which also include Magia. I just came across Open Mandriva as curious to see if there were other desktops focused, easy to use rolling distributions similar to OpenSUSE. Personally, I only seriously used Ubuntu-based derivatives. I've only played with Fedora, Manjaro, and OpenSUSE, but Magia and Open Mandriva never crossed my radar. Sadly, I don't have time to distro hop and play around anymore. But it will also be on the list of things to try when I do find the time. Kind regards, Stahl. So incredible email. We may use this as a full episode in the future because we are always looking for unique takes.
It's been a while since I've used either one of those.
Yeah. Same here.
But Jill and Michael, I've never used any of those. So, I mean, I use OpenSUSE. There's that. But any of those. So
and Ubuntu based.
I'm going to rely on you here to kind of give your feedback on what you think of this.
I know Jill knows a lot more about this topic than I do. So I'm just going to give like a little bit of stuff.
Michael.
We'll see. But so Mandrake was my first distribution was technically Red Hat Linux, and then I found Mandrake because Mandrake was kind of like the beginner distro in the 90s and early 2000s, and it was like they didn't necessarily, it wasn't beginner. It wasn't beginner friendly, but it was more beginner friendly than anything else, and it made desktop usage easier because for example, back in the day. I like to use this example because of how ridiculous it is to think about, because now you just install the system and you're good to go. Back in the day, you used to have to know what kind of monitor you had. Otherwise, you would set it on fire. And that's not even a joke. You literally could set it on fire because it would just like short circuit and stuff. And there's...
Feature?
Yeah, exactly. So Mandrake made it possible for it to automatically detect. I think it might have been the first. I don't know if it was officially the first, but it was the first time I saw it.
Yeah, one of the first.
Yeah, where it automatically detected the right monitor and everything, and you didn't have to do it. And I was like, this is amazing. And like just something that simple these days is like, of course, whatever. But Mandrake was like the go-to thing for me. And it also, it was a shame because it went away. And then later, OpenMandriva came back, and there was like some legal stuff, involved in that. And then OpenMandriva came back when Mandriva went away. And then, I think OpenMandriva and Magia happened at the same time. And I actually have no idea if Magia is the correct way of saying it. And it's been this long, and I still have no idea which one it is. But it's either Magia, something like that. Anyway, so these distributions are very interesting. And the KDE thing, yeah, you know me. I do like KDE. But I've used Magia and OpenMandriva many years ago, but it's been a very long time, and it's probably time to check it out again.
There you go, Michael.
Yeah.
That's what your next challenge is going to be when I get you in a weak moment and get you to agree to a challenge. That's what it will be.
Oh,
so is it a challenge to it's not a punishment challenge, it's a challenge.
This is a challenge, yeah.
Okay, so I was just saying if it was the rat poison type of thing, or if it was
no, it's not that one. That's when you misbehaved. Then we throw that one in there. Yeah.
And I'm going to elaborate on what Michael said. It had one of the best installers, easiest used installers of the time. And it would actually, detect your printer and even your sound card as long as you had a Sound Blaster or compatible. And that was huge for that time. It was the very first distro I installed that I didn't have to go through X386 and do all that configuration in the terminal. It would just set it up with a nice user interface.
Exactly. It would even show you the stuff in a GUI.
In a GUI. Yeah.
People are so spoiled now.
Your bar was so
Ryan is so spoiled now with this
installation. Very spoiled, clearly. Yeah.
So, and back in the early days, it was called Linux Mandrake. And then later it was renamed to Mandrake Linux. And
interesting.
Yeah. So me and Michael
seems very important to do.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't remember this ever happening with the different names. I always just called it Mandrake and ignored everything else.
So me and Michael actually both talked about the importance of Mandrake in the early years and shared our stories with TWIL Computer and Michael Sweet of Open Printing on Destination Linux episode number 351. And TWIL actually worked on Linux Mandrake. So those stories are really fascinating. And I actually even showed off one of my original boxes. Actually, it was my original box of Linux Mandrake that I bought at the store.
Which is awesome that Jill still has it. Yes.
Yes.
For those who are curious, yeah, of course she does.
And yeah, we really do need to talk about OpenMandriva and Magia on a future DL because I want to revisit those distros definitely. Especially since they have, a rolling edition that Ryan would appreciate.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be left out of this conversation because you also have all this information about these older distros and things. So I'll tell you what I know is Mandrake is the root of a plant historically derived either from plants of the genus Mandragora, found in the Mediterranean region, or from other species such as the Bryonia alba or the American mandrake, which also have similar properties. So, in case you were curious, that's
I appreciate that information, Ryanpedia.
Yeah, that's off the top of my head. Someone wants to fact check me.
Also, there's also for extra information, the mandrake plant is poisonous, and you should not consume it. And also, the next thing is that mandrake plants were also a critical thing in Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Very.
And they were emotional too.
Very emotional. You don't want to hear a mandrake cry.
You don't want to hear it squeak.
Oh my goodness! Wow, bunch of Harry Potter fans here. You just squeaked, Jill. Are you a mandrake? You come from planet Mandrake?
No, that's why our ears are still working because she's not a mandrake.
Oh, okay,
I could go much higher than that, but I don't want to hurt our viewers' ears.
Yeah, just use your imagination, folks. All right. So, Stahl, thank you so much for sending an incredible email. You got us all talking, got us laughing. You got me to really think about what a mandrake is and give a definition off the top of my head, which is amazing.
Very impressive.
Yeah,
very impressive. You were able to pull that, so quickly.
All right.
You were able to pull that mandrake out of the hat.
Oh my God.
Or the pot.
Jill, please. No more. Michael's enough. All right. Let's get to our
never
interview.
Enough dad jokes.
Right now. Do it.
Well, I mean, we should also probably tell people how they can send feedback if they want to.
Oh, if you want to send it, really, you're going to make me look embarrassing like that by keeping that. Oh my gosh, Michael! After I complimented you, now I'm going to look like a goofball clapping at the screen because you go to destinationlinux.net/comments to send in your comments, or destinationlinux.net/forum. And if you have a specific comment about how Michael mistreats me, we will be read on the show. So,
okay, to be fair,
yeah.
I didn't do it on purpose. But also, this is why people love our show.
Yeah.
Because you're mean to me? Is that what it is?
No, I was saying good stuff earlier about, like he does make good videos and stuff like that too. So like you should check it out. He's got good cybersecurity videos, got hardware information, all sorts of stuff on his channel, DOS Geek. So check it out. I will have a link in the show notes for all of that.
Now. Cut to the interview.
This episode is sponsored by Sandfly, but instead of just telling you about them, how about we bring on the CEO of the company? And today we're going to be doing just that. So we'd like to welcome the CEO of Sandfly, Craig Rowland. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Great. I appreciate being here. I listen to your podcast. I really enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Michael, I'm going to steal the first question here because I'm geeking out over having a cybersecurity
all right,
person
fair enough,
here
but
with
don't
us.
take too long.
This is what I want to do for a living.
Yes.
So, I get the first question. So, Craig, I looked through your career when we were going through this. We knew we were going to have you on the show, and I was blown away, by the way. Just fascinating career. But I wanted to ask first about your career breaking into computer networks professionally in the U.S. Air Force Information Warfare Center. What is the wildest lesson that you learned from your experience there, and how has that stuck with you through to today?
Yeah, so I'll probably back up and clarify a bit then. So I got hired to work with the group of guys out of San Antonio, Texas, who are the founding members of the Air Force Information Warfare Squadron. So they were spinning up a company at the time called TWIL Group, and I got hired initially to do network pen testing. I was doing it before. Eventually, they found out I could code, so I became the lead exploit developer for the vulnerability scanner. So I wrote all the network attack libraries. But I think one of the most interesting things I learned from doing this type of work early on, even before I started at TWIL Group, was just how the smallest error could lead to a mass compromise, right? So one of the earliest things I did was we were going up against a network to do an audit, and they were pretty well secured. But I found one night that they had an FTP server. And of course, I'm going through the FTP server, and I find one directory buried deep down in it that was writable. And in this directory, they had some scripts. And I determined by reading these scripts that they were writing to this directory, and that something inside the network was grabbing these scripts and running them each night to do maintenance. So at that point, I was able to modify the script so that when they ran, they would throw me back an X term. So basically, I modified the scripts. I went to bed. I waited for the crons to kick off, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. I woke up in the morning, and I had a whole bunch of terminals were on my screen. So the lesson here really is it could be something so small. It's just so easy to mess it up. And it could cause the whole things to fall like a bunch of dominoes. So, when we talk about things like network segmentation, separating your network, separation of privileges, things like that, there's a reason and lessons behind why this is all done. So I think that's something we even still see today. A lot of these lessons really just happen over and over and over again. And your adversaries will study you, and they will, as one of our advisors, Rob Joyce, he's head up the NSA's Tailored Access Operations Group. He said your enemies will know your network better than you do, right? And I think that's really true. So that's really one of the lessons I learned, is that as a red team, you really have to do reconnaissance well. You learn a lot about how networks work, and you just become really good at finding the cracks that were left open, often by accident. And that's it. That's one of the lessons there, is just understand your adversaries may know your network better than you, and they're looking for the smallest edge to get into that system.
You know what's so interesting is we're talking about this from an enterprise standpoint, but even personal security, right? It's the very same kind of methods. Is your enemy's going to know you better with all the data breaches and everything going on than sometimes our own partners know us. And it's the little things that we're not thinking about that they spend all day looking for a loophole, and we're just going about our day to kind of get in. So I think that's a valuable lesson.
It's also a lot of people don't think about
standpoints.
the whole. They know so much because not that they have the information, it's because they also analyze it. They're analyzing you, as in you're not doing it to yourself, and your friends and family are not going to be analyzing you, like at least not to that degree. So
what's the little details too? Like, you got me thinking, Michael, about we were talking earlier about posting things on social media before the show started, and not posting photos and things. But if you notice that sometimes you hear about these breaches and things because they were able to read an address on an envelope on a picture that somebody posted on social media, and somebody zoomed.
Oh, yeah.
Little things you don't think about that can lead to, something bigger, even, in a personal data protection.
Share less is my advice. Unfortunately, social media, people, they want to share a lot, and that dopamine hit, they want to get a like, but you might be feeding someone who really doesn't like you information that they really shouldn't have. And unfortunately, you can't control it. Your family does, but you just have to be exceedingly careful. Certainly, if you're in cybersecurity, I urge extreme caution for people in the industry not to be posting a bunch of personal stuff online.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I think that's true for everybody, but especially for those people.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I don't post anything unless I'm traveling. Then I'll post it after I've already left the place I was at. So if I'm going to be posting something.
Yeah.
You don't get doxxed and or swatted and all these other things that people have come up with. Yeah.
And I never do it in the area I actually live in. It's only if I'm traveling, and only after the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So you founded some startups that caught the eye of giants like Cisco and 3Com. And I'm very curious about this. Like, looking back, what do you think gave you your early ventures that edge? And how does that experience to shape the way you look at things like, leading Sandfly Security now?
Yeah, so I've been pretty fortunate, I think, because I was early in the industry in cybersecurity. I remember telling my father, he goes, "Oh, what do you want to do when you get out of college?" This had been in the late 80s, so I'm in my 50s now. And I said, I'm going to do internet security. And he's like, "What's the internet?" Right? Back then it was called ARPANET, right? No one knew, right, what this thing was called. So, so I think I've always kind of had this inclination to go in the industry, and I'm lucky that I've been able to just kind of select good groups of people to work with. I think that's part of it, is being able to recognize that you have to have an A team. Like, a venture capitalist early on told me that they will fund an A team with a B idea, but they'll never fund an A idea with a B team, right? You always have that. The A team can adapt. The A team can adapt, right? The B team never adapts, and the B team will hire C players and D players to E players. A team tends to keep it very high. So I've been very lucky. So I did that work with Wheel Group. We did a Cisco Secure scanner, Cisco Secure IDS. We got bought by Cisco. I then left to start my own company that did an automated intrusion detection response system that would eliminate 95% of all false alarms. That got bought by Cisco. And I was also sharing offices with a company at the time called Tipping Point Technologies. They did a multi-gigabit line speed intrusion prevention system. And so in exchange for helping them with some early product design and some hiring some key personnel, they were giving my startup free office space. So I've always just managed to kind of find good people to work with. I think that's really part of my advice. So, and what was funny was with the company I founded that got bought eventually, at the time, I was thinking of trying to apply to another job. And this would have been 1999 or so when I was looking. And there was this brand new search engine that started. I was like, I like these guys. They're doing a really good job. And so I sent my resume in, and they actually responded. And then I never followed up. So that was my chance to get into Google, right? 1999 Google, right? So, but again, it's for some reason, I think there's a bit of a sense that you got to find something that looks good, simple products, simple ideas, sharp people, that all kind of mixes together to make a good company. Complexity, I avoid like the plague.
You were talking about your history. I used ARPANET as well, and I came from kind of the world of the bulletin board systems and the
For
leak
sure.
bulletin board systems.
Mhm.
What's your experience with that?
Yeah, pretty much same deal. In high school,
Cool.
there were not, in high school, the idea of getting on a Unix system was just unheard of. You had Apple IIs.
Yeah.
And if you
Yes.
wanted to learn other computer systems, the only way was to seek it through extracurricular activity, as we say. So I would, I guess, sometimes give complimentary security audits, as I would say that too. Um, and nothing bad. It's just basically teenagers messing around. The bulletin board scene. I met a lot of guys locally. We used to do dumpster diving together. I still know some of these people in the industry today. Never dumpster dive out back of Apple computer. They drink so much coffee. You just get covered in coffee grinds, right? And you just get a lot of funny stories from that whole scene. So I had a very similar background. And in fact, I learned to drive stick shift after we were dumpster diving out back of TRW in Reston, Virginia one night. And, going through someone's dumpster is not illegal, but it was 3 a.m. and we were the only car around except for one other car, which is a police officer. And he pulled us over because he obviously wants to know what you're doing driving around this place. And so we pull over and I'm in the back seat and the guy driving had an expired license. And the other guy was someone had a German passport, so he couldn't drive. And, he's asking, what are you guys doing? And he's like, oh, nothing, just driving around. And he goes, are you guys into computers? And the guy drives like, no, we're not. And of course, he shines a flashlight to me in the back seat. I am absolutely covered with 9-track tapes and electronic circuit boards you just pulled out of this dumpster.
No, not computers. I'm not guilty.
Yeah. and at that point, I was the only one with a valid license, a learner permit. And the other guy had expired. I had to get in this car at 3 a.m. He didn't do anything to us. He goes, he can't, again, we're just pulling out stuff. But I had to learn to drive stick shift at 3 a.m, grinding gears while with a couple of my local BBS friends going back. So yeah, I had definitely some good times back in the golden era, I guess they would say, the golden age. Nowadays you could probably get into trouble doing stuff like that. But back then it's like, whatever.
Hey, phone freaking.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
All sorts of stuff.
You had a different form of war driving.
Yes, we did.
It was. Yeah, my mom would pick up the phone and I'd have a war dialer going on all night. She'd be interrupting it. I'd get so mad at her and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, so good times. I miss it in a way. The sound of the modem is almost like classical music.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah. It's something when you hear it, it instantly brings you back to that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
For a second, you enjoy the nostalgia, and then you imagine yourself having to deal with it all the time, and you're like, no, it's okay.
Well, but our team here, we joke sometimes on how much better the internet would be if we only had modems and Gopher, and like, we did, like, before you have to have an internet license to get on the internet, and it involves answering some questions about the TCP/IP protocol and stuff. We just weed out a ton of trouble. But
yeah, there you go. That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, Craig, you've spoke at conferences like Defcon and Usenix, which contain some of the best security minds in the industry. What's the most unexpected question or challenge an audience member ever threw at you? I thought this would be interesting.
Yeah, so the Usenix, they're fairly peaceable, actually. If you're not technically incompetent, right? They kind of leave you alone. I was lucky. I think I spoke at DEFCON 6. So I was pretty early on. Back then, I think the first one I went to was like DEFCON 3 or 4. I don't recall. But back then, everyone fit in a single room. Like now, I went to the first time to DEFCON last year, like over 20 years. I couldn't imagine. It's like 30,000. It's absolutely crazy.
I know.
So
I went to the first 4 in that little motel off the strip.
Yeah, I forgot the Alexis Park. Was that it?
Yeah.
All right. I might have run into you and just didn't know at the time.
That's hilarious.
Like two ships passing in the dark, right?
Yes.
So,
exactly.
The last one, I think the first one I went to was at the old Aladdin. And of course, like there's a lot of mischief. I was not involved. I actually was working at the time, and it was like, security clearances and stuff. I couldn't be involved with trouble, but it was interesting times, that's for sure.
Well, I love that I hear the stories from DEFCON about like how it kind of drives the hotel employees and things nutty because they have to do special security for their elevators. They have to put all of these special things in place for their Wi-Fi because you're dealing with the best minds in hacking.
And
There is.
30,000 of them.
So,
Yeah.
it's like nothing is secure. You talk about the details, Craig, when you're at Defcon and you run one of those businesses where all the hackers are coming in, and most of them probably just want to see, can they? Because that's what they do. They're curious.
That's right. I'm big into man, I've always believed keeping a low profile, right? You get away with a lot more stuff. So, but if you go to DEF CON and you got antennas hanging out of your backpack, you look like a porcupine, they're going to ask you some questions. Now, Vegas security now, I mean, they're not going to mess around. So I would recommend people, if you go, keep a low profile. You'll have a lot better time usually.
Yeah. That makes sense. So Sandfly Security, you focus on agentless intrusion. We talk about it when we're discussing Sandfly every week, and that's a very unique niche for focusing specifically on Linux as well. And I'm just curious, what sparked your idea? We've learned a little bit about your career and history for Sandfly, and why did you decide Linux needed some special attention there?
Yeah, so I'm a longtime Linux user. Again, probably back when it used to come on the front of a magazine as a floppy disks, kind of like Slackware kind of thing, right? Yeah, exactly.
Slackware.
Yes. Yeah, so I've used it for a long time. Linux is interesting because everybody thinks the internet runs on Windows, but that's not
I know.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the wrong case, right? So it runs 90-95% of all cloud workloads. It's an industrial control systems, critical infrastructure. I currently live in New Zealand. When I got on a flight, the in-flight entertainment system on my headrest is Linux. I've seen it reboot, right? So it's just it's all over the place. And I saw as a pen tester, I had an early experience when we were auditing a hospital that really burned in my mind what's going on. And what happened is I broke into a system there. It was an AIX system, but it could have been Linux. It doesn't matter. The main thing about it, though, is it had an uptime of 4 years, meaning that the system had been up for 4 years without any reboots, without any patches. And I knew at that point we were home free. We were not going to be caught because nobody was looking at that system. I call them internet crack houses. Right? These systems that are unwatched, nobody knows, the criminals move in, pretty soon you've seen some graffiti show up, that some cars are being broken into, it's the same deal, right? An abandoned house in a neighborhood. So a lot of Linux ended up like that. A lot of Linux is not being real watched. Linux is an umbrella term. So it means everything from a big GPU cluster up in the cloud down to these Raspberry Pis that I'm surrounded with here at home, right? So when someone says, oh, we're going to load an agent on Linux, well, my first question is, what distribution, what hardware, what patches can I update my system? If I update the agent, is it going to break the system, right? It's critical infrastructure. So you find out the marketing says we're going to do this, but the actuality is very, very narrow in terms of what they can actually do. So with all these problems we find with stability and performance impacts in the agent, I said, what if we got rid of the agent? Right? This is the biggest problem. So what if we just got rid of it? Well, if we got rid of it, then at that point, we could run on way more Linux systems. We can run on systems that are over a decade old, all the way back to Linux kernel 2.6.32, all the way up to a modern system. We can run on Intel, AMD, ARM, MIPS, IBM Power, and IBM S390 CPUs. So that means we cover everything, everything from cloud systems to embedded devices, Ubiquiti routers, Synology systems, appliances, Raspberry Pis. We run on IP cameras, so you might not think, but there are people who sell access to cameras. So you say, I want to see all the cameras in Boston. There are Israeli companies that will say, right, we can get you access to those cameras, and it's like an on the ground recon, right? So you don't want people on your cameras. But the idea here is, let's watch everything and do it without an agent, so we get this massive visibility, and that's really what Sandfly. That's kind of how it came about. I just got tired of seeing unwatched Linux. It really bugs me because I know it's a really big problem, a really big threat.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of especially embedded devices and stuff where they don't even bother to do updates or anything.
Updates, yeah.
And so that plus all the companies who just assume that everything is good to go and don't even bother to do any updates is absolutely.
So many IoT devices that run Linux, but like you said, they don't get patched. And I don't even know the company's names. Like you purchase these things for cameras or whatever, I've never even heard of them before.
You don't. Medical devices are another big problem. I tell people one of my nightmares is I wake up in the hospital after an auto wreck and I see the morphine drip has a Wi-Fi sticker on it. Right? Just like, I mean, just, dude, just like, it's like it's a bad, we recently, last week, some heart monitors out of China, they were found to have a backdoor communicating back to IP addresses in China with patient doctor information that was built into the firmware. So it's just like, yep, Linux is all over, and it's not closely watched.
Yeah,
that's true. And I think people have like a false sense of security in a way too, because of it's known as being so good in terms of security wise. They just kind of assume they don't have to do anything. But we were talking about the agentless stuff, and the agentless stuff basically sounds kind of like almost magical. So could you peel back the curtain a bit for that, and without giving away the secret sauce, unless that's thousand
Sure.
interest, then fine. And explain how Sandfly pulls that off in a way that's different from the traditional approach.
Sure. So the basic function of the product is we work a lot like Ansible in that we come in over SSH, because SSH is a ubiquitous protocol in Linux. We have a specialized binary written in Golang that is purpose built just to do Linux forensics investigation, meaning that it's fully self-contained, it's statically built. We don't trust the remote system. We assume the remote system is compromised and that the libraries are all compromised. That's trying to trick us. And then it's specially designed to investigate for processes, files, directories, users, systemd services, scheduled tasks, and also mechanisms to decloak people are trying to hide, like loadable kernel module rootkits, things that are trying to hide from us. We have mechanisms to build that. So essentially goes over, it will investigate the areas we instruct it to, and then that forensic data is then removed from the system and then taken back to our server where we can further analyze it. But not just for size of intrusion, we also look for things such as SSH keys. So we track SSH keys. We want to know who's using those keys, where they are, first time we saw them, what they have access to. We could do drift detection, meaning we could tell you if a new process has started that we've never seen before, new users have been added, things like that. And we could also do things like a password auditor. We could send over a list of like the worst passwords for Linux, and we could check your user accounts directly on the device to say, hey, this camera has, some accounts that are going to get you compromised. But the idea here is to cover a wide range of these Linux all these Linux attack vectors, because as I discussed earlier, Linux is not Windows. So Windows attackers tend to use like a precompiled binary. Windows is great in that binaries are hyper compatible across all the systems. It's not necessarily true on Linux, but Linux attackers tend to work differently too, because they use a lot of living off the land tactics, meaning that built-in commands. And I tell people, Linux is not an operating system. Linux is a programming language. Right? You could string together all the Linux commands that are benign, and I can make them very malicious, right? That's just the power of Linux. That's why we love the thing, right? So that's how the attackers know this. So a lot of attacks might not load any malware at all. They might simply use the built-in utilities of Linux to execute their attack. I mean, think how many systems have Netcat built in, or even Nmap. Why do you have a port scanner loaded by default? I don't know. Why not? It's Linux, right? So or just basic bash shell could run a reverse shell if you know what commands to run. So for us, the secret sauce, as it were, is just that we know how these tactics are. We're specially designed just for this task. We're not doing configuration management. We're not tracking vulnerabilities. We just don't care. We're really looking for compromised Linux systems and for the things that are going to get you compromised, such as, for instance, again, a private key hanging around that's unencrypted, or keys that might be moving, things like that. So that's kind of the whole. That's not it in a high level what we're doing.
Well, we were just talking about on the show how Linux powers everything from servers to IoT devices and routers, but it's often seen as secure by default. How is the landscape changing where we can no longer just assume Linux doesn't require additional security? You've touched on this a little bit, but can you expand?
Linux is secure by default if you don't do anything with it other than set it up and plug it in, right? So like, if I put up an Ubuntu server or Red Hat sensors, it's got SSH port 22, odds of getting hacked are very, very low, but nobody uses the system in that configuration. They're loading up other applications, third-party software, they're making changes, they're making, temporary fixes, right? Things like that. So that's how Linux gets hacked. Or it's a user gets an SSH key stolen, or they pick a bad password or something, that's how it's getting hacked. So while it is secure out of the box, for the most part, is what people do to it once it's put in operational setting. That's where the problems begin. So like you look at something like Log4j that hit systems a couple of years ago. It was buried deep down inside a complicated Java library, and there's just no way anybody is going to find it, right? Not by, obviously someone found out to exploit it, but it just, from a Linux security perspective, there was no change you could have made to that default Linux box that would have really helped you. Maybe if you had SE Linux enabled, it would have prevented the attack, but there's other things like that as well, just badly configured server, again, bad passwords, things like that. So I would never assume Linux is secure if people are using it operationally. You got to keep an eye on it, I think would be the short answer there.
I think that's really important lesson for people, because we, I think, take for granted how protected we've been in the Linux world. You compare it to giving your family members a Windows PC. They're going to have malware and everything on it, maybe within a few hours if they don't know the internet very well. Whereas Linux,
and unfortunately, they can't get their toolbars anymore.
Yeah. With Linux, you could give your family a secure system, and you could go a very long time without having to worry about, oh, my desktop's taken over and ads are popping up every time I open my browser, all that type of stuff. But the landscape is changing quite a bit. And Linux is still very secure by default. But what I mean by changing is there's so many things that utilize extensions too these days, like pip, Python. There's these extensions that community members are writing, and we just assume that it's secure when we're installing these things because we read this article that says, oh, you want to get this module working, then install this pip, and then you get this extra code and it works and you're great. And then
we're assuming they're doing due diligence, but wait, they're not.
Yeah,
exactly. It is
almost
a problem.
Never.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
The supply chains attack have been a problem for for many years. In our product, for instance, generally speaking, like if we use a third-party library, it's usually coming from Google, or it's something we versioned into the product and we hand audited the whole thing, right? But even today, I read about people using VS Code, and there was a theme out there that was malicious. We even instruct our employees, like, any browser plugin, you have to get approval from us to freeload it. Same thing for these themes. I mean, I would just urge people to be exceedingly careful. If you're using these plugins and these themes and stuff, if they're not coming from the vendor or from a vendor you trust, like Google or something like that, right? I'd be exceedingly careful. I mean, if you're pulling in random code from Ninja 69 off GitHub, Ninja 69 might be a cool dude, but Ninja 70, who takes the project over in a year and a half, he might not be so nice. And you don't know, right? The maintainers change, and you're like, I don't know, right? Things can happen.
So I want to ask a follow-up to this. We're talking about kind of security in general, but there's always a question in the Linux community. We've tried to cover it multiple times on the show. Are antivirus or anti-malware solutions needed on Linux? Do you feel like the answer is changing, and where do you stand on this so far?
Yeah, we get asked that, certainly about ransomware. They're like, well, why is it ransomware taken off more in Linux and stuff? And it's in like ESXi systems and stuff, which are not really Linux, but that's a separate topic. I think Linux is funny because it's not, each Linux system is almost like a bespoke custom thing when an attacker gets onto it, right? You think about an org could take a basic Linux, and then the power of it is you can customize it, right? You have the sources, you could compile, you could do all these things. So the malware has a harder time, I think, really spreading because of that. But with that said, a lot of the desktop distros tend to be fairly uniform. And we are seeing some malware starting to go after desktop users. Do you need to run anti-malware, antivirus? I don't know. That's probably up for the end user to decide. I would just say that a lot of antivirus scanning is kind of a Windows idea. This idea that I'm going to scan all these files and they're not going to change. The binaries tend to stay the same. Linux malware tends to be very, very fluid. A lot of it's open source. It's easily recompiled. It's easily modified. It's easily obfuscated. So the anti-malware stuff on Linux, from my experience, is like, it can maybe find really low grade stuff, but really the more sophisticated or even moderately sophisticated, it's going to have a tough time. That's my experience with it in general. So do you need to run it?
And your system like Sandfly would catch it at the point where it's starting to change files, or somebody's getting into the system utilizing something like that, right?
Yeah, we tend to be what's called a tactics hunter. So if you run our product, we're not looking for the specific piece of malware. Like it could be like the foobar A worm. We don't care, because tomorrow there's foobar B, foobar C, foobar D. But the tactics of how they maintain presence on these systems is really what we're, how did they hide? How did they get in? So I use an example of a log. I use the example of a log file cleaner. So on Linux, you have some log files like wtemp and utemp, and these just show who logged in. So there's three main ways to modify log file. One, you can nuke it from orbit. I just delete the thing, but that's fairly obvious, and crypto miners do it, and they just don't care. They're just trying to steal some CPU. The second way in is I could go to the line that showed me logged in, and I could overwrite it with nulls, right? Overwrite it with zeros. Because the Linux auditing tools, when they see an invalid entry, they don't say this is invalid. They just skip it, don't tell you anything. Okay. The third way is I could delete the entry and then splice the log back together again, kind of like you're editing a film. And at that point, you just won't see the entry. So these are the three ways the logs can be edited. Now, there are dozens of log cleaners that do this. So the traditional Windows malware approach would be like, we're going to scan the binaries for these signs of these log cleaners, where our approach is like, we're just going to look at the log. Because if we could tell you nuked it, or if we could tell that line's been overwritten with zeros, which is very unusual on Linux, or we could see a splice has happened, I don't care what tool did it. It's completely irrelevant. The tactic, we made the tactic no longer work. So that's how we get into it. Even with some of this more advanced novel malware, they say it's undetectable, has been detected. We can often find it because the tactics are revealing, right? Linux is the premier open source operating system in the world, and the word is open, right? So the minute we see something trying to hide, you've got our attention, right? We got your attention. I actually like it when you try to hide. You make my job easier. I have a video on YouTube called Ninja on Rooftops, which explains this concept. Ooh. Okay. The idea with Ninja on Rooftops is you want to break into a bunch of houses. So you go on YouTube and the guy's like, yeah, put on your ninja suit, start running around. No one sees you. So you're running around, you run across the roofs, you're dressed in black, and you're getting away with murder. But that works great until the first time someone sees you. And at that moment, the fact that you're wearing a ninja outfit in the middle of the night has everyone's attention, and they're all looking for you, right? And that's the same with a lot of this. Yeah, that's the same with a lot of this stealth malware and hiding, right? The minute you hide,
ruined my plans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the minute you hide, if we see how you hide, at that point, we know it's absolutely malicious intent, and we could see you everywhere. So that.
Oh, that's interesting.
There you go. So that's cool. That's why we focus on tactics hunting versus specific malware signatures.
Nice. That's very cool.
Yeah. There was a major breach that took place with telecom not so long ago, and what was interesting is...
Was it ninjas?
It was ninjas, of course, on rooftops, naturally, Michael. But what was interesting about it is some of the companies did catch it before it got through, which wasn't as reported. But of the companies that got caught, you were talking earlier about the fact that there are systems that don't get looked at. And as I understand how this hack worked, is essentially telecom companies had created backdoors for government operations when they had, certain subpoenas and different things to be able to go in and look at those records. And of course, since it's just supposed to be for the government, only the government used it, and nobody monitored the fact that people were going on to these systems and using them for nefarious purposes, because it's just for the government. And so that's how they kind of got. And it's those, like you said, those little things, number one, because it's just this little section of an overall telecom business, this little backdoor that you put in that's just for government officials that get got. But also, they didn't try to really hide because nobody was watching. So they were just going through and getting into the systems and started pulling all of the records that the government was interested in. Their people they had subpoenaed and other stuff. So it was kind of an interesting hack.
But it's only for the government. How dare they?
Yeah, I know, right? I always tell people my door is only for
Michael, it was a government. It just wasn't the U.S. government.
Oh, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's probably accurate. And also, just by the way, I had to look it up. GitHub Ninja 69 and Ninja 70 do exist, but no one's using them.
Oh, there you go. I don't want to give you any ideas.
So, sorry, Craig, if I see a ninja with Sandfly Security, there's an update, and it's there in a minute. There's a ninja.
Exactly.
That's how you know ninjas are real, because you never see them, and that proves they're real.
That's right. You never know when you're gonna run across one.
Love it. A lot of our listeners work in the field. They're in the enterprise. And then there's a lot of listeners who are wanting to break into the field, or they are just working enthusiasts who manage home labs or servers at home, and maybe one day hoping that they'll have a chance to break into the industry in one way, their career being focused around Linux and cybersecurity and those things. So what's some career advice that you would give for people who are looking to maybe become an employee at Sandfly one day, let's say?
That's an interesting question. Kind of when I got in the industry, there were no certifications, there was no cybersecurity degree. There's just none of this stuff existed. I think it was just the people who did it out of pure burning interest and passion, right? I've always liked the topic. I think in general we still have kind of adopted that same philosophy of we just want to get people who are really good. I don't even necessarily look at your degree. One of the best developers I ever worked with was a high school graduate only, right? So, I think more and more, especially, it's more of like show me the code. Kind of like I think you've been seeing Elon, these guys kind of the same way. The way they're hired is like show me your GitHub repo, and so I'm not that might be one thing to look for is like I would. If I was going to cybersecurity, there are a lot of people who say you don't need to learn how to code. My advice is I would ignore that advice. It helps you immensely. I'm not asking, look, you don't need to be the second coming of, the greatest coder ever, but I think to have some familiarity with a language like Python is common, C, of course, is all over. Maybe, one of the new memory safe languages like Golang or Rust might be useful as well, but to have some basic fundamental knowledge of programming would be helpful. I would also encourage people, to have some basic networking experience as well. And, a lot of people who are really good at cybersecurity started off on the admin side. They knew how to run and maintain Linux networks. And they ran into problems because a lot of times security is really just problem solving on a different level, right? So being able to debug network and Linux system issues and things like that's how you get into the more deeper forensics and understanding of intrusions. And of course, just a natural interest as well. There might be some interesting courses, you could take out there for basic hacking and red team. I wouldn't get obsessed with the certificates. Like I say, we don't really look at them, but if it helps you to become better at your skill, you might want to consider doing that. So I would try to focus on practical knowledge. The other thing I would say about cybersecurity is when I started, you could be very broad, but now you got to, I think, eventually yes, you want some breadth in your knowledge, but you need to have some specialization. It's just such a deep field that, I would encourage you to have broad understanding. Sure. Do you need to understand basics of cryptography? Sure. Do you need to be a cryptanalyst? No, probably not, right? But you might want to have a specialty, where you're like, I focus on, network attacks detection, or I focus on, like in my case, I tend to focus just on Linux forensics, right? I don't really know much about Windows anymore. I had to specialize. So I think that's what you're starting to find more and more is you need to pick something you like doing. And it might be Windows. I'm not knocking you if you like Windows, but it needs to be, I think you need to have some type of specialty would be really helpful and some technical knowledge to back it up.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I know, I grew up, my father had a small computer business, and I remember we would have people come in for interviews, and the best people we hired were the ones who were in the basement building computers all the time and working on them and fixing them. And the ones that came in with the degrees, like they had the book knowledge, but then one of our tricks we would do as a test for our interview is we would switch the power supply in the back from 110 to 220. And so we'd be like, the computer's broke, fix it. And the ones who were, the basement dwellers working on their computers all the time, maybe 5 minutes, and they would see that switch and flick it back. The ones that just went to school and had all the certificates, they never would solve it. They would just sit there, just perplexed, tearing everything out of the machine, putting it back in. Like they had the book knowledge, but they didn't have that experience and that love and that curiosity. I think would probably be something that would be really important for there. We talk about, or you talked about for a moment, kind of desktop distros. You talked about being surrounded by Raspberry Pis and things. So what Linux distro do you run, out of curiosity?
I, keeping with my OPSEC, I won't tell you.
I love it.
I won't tell you. I'm sorry. So because like I said, my name.
So Kali Linux confirmed.
No, I'll tell you that I don't run Kali. I don't run Kali Linux, but I don't mean to be hyper paranoid, but it's like as I think I told you guys early on, my name is actually shown up inside on Linux malware as a variable name, right? So I'm just there are people out there who will target me specifically. So we don't, even if you see my videos, if you think you know what distro I'm running, I might just change it. You just don't really, you might not.
Yeah.
Really know.
The next time I distro hop, I'm not telling Ryan what it is.
Yeah.
I like that.
I've tried almost all the desktop distros. They're so good today. I know people joke about Linux on the desktop, but I switched from Mac several years ago, just to full-time Linux on desktop. I don't miss a single thing about the Mac. So all the desktop distros today are really, really good. It's
just amazing how much better they've gotten in just the years I've been in Linux. Yeah. It's just been incredible change. But speaking of desktop users, Sandfly introduced something really cool this week, and I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about that. So what were you all up to this week? You're cooking something cool.
Yeah. So over the years, we've generally been viewed as kind of an enterprise security software product. Now, we've always offered a free version of the license because, we contribute that open source projects, we donate money and stuff. So we kind of like to have something free for the Linux users. But the free version had restrictions in it. Such as how many, you could only see 5 results at a time, and other things were shut off. And so you could use it, but it was kind of a hassle. So over time, people have said, hey, look, I'm willing to pay for a license, but, can you sell me a license? But we just didn't really have it set up to do that. So this week we introduced some new licensing tiers. So we have a home user edition, a pro license, which is more commercial user, and then our traditional air gap license, because our product work on an air gap networks. So the home user license is designed really for a home lab. So it's basically for $99 a year, you can watch 10 hosts, without pretty much any restrictions. The only restrictions we really have is there's no SSO, you can't export to Splunk. So these enterprise features are not there, but everything else in the product is basically unlocked. So at that point, $99 for 10 hosts, we think is a pretty good deal. We also, because we're destination Linux fans, we also are offering a coupon code. If you go to the website, you put a destination 50 in the coupon code, we'll give you 50% off that as well. So for about $50 a year for 10 hosts, we think it's a pretty good deal. All the features are basically unlocked, and you could use the product at home. And this isn't an academic thing. A lot of nation state hackers have been going after Soho and home networks and using them as relay points to attack nation state critical infrastructure. So we actually want you to check your Linux systems at home. We actually feel it's an important thing to do for various reasons. But yeah, give the product a go. We feel it's a pretty reasonable price for the full featured, agentless Linux EDR.
Very generous too. 10 hosts is extremely generous. I think more than what most people would need. Jill needs about 100,000 of those licenses because she runs a museum. But
I've heard about the museum. So yeah.
If
you think about it, it's less than $1 a host, really.
Yeah.
And that's with the regular one. If you have the coupon code destination 50, it's even less. It's 50 cents a host. So
I think the education piece of this is fascinating, though, too. I love what you said that, hey, this isn't just about education, but hey, all those people, we get questions all the time, people wanting to break into industry and things. You got to use these tools. You got to understand how they work. You want to be able to show and demonstrate if you're going into an interview that you've, utilized and played with enterprise grade software before and integrated with it. And so I think it's a very important thing from an education standpoint. People check this out as well. It's incredible offer. And if you haven't checked out Sandfly's interface, by the way, who writes your guys' GUI? Because it's incredible, man.
Yeah, one of our team members down here lives in Christchurch, and I'm sure he'll listen to this part of the show, and he'll be quite happy to hear it. We have definitely a lot of compliments. We put a lot of work into the user interface just because if the product is easy to use and easy to understand, it helps a lot. So, Linux in particular, I'd say for your people who want to get into cybersecurity, I tell people I would focus on Linux because it is our experience that in the InfoSec teams and big companies even, they'll have a lot of people doing Windows and a relatively small number of people looking after a lot of Linux boxes. They're horribly outnumbered. So if you were to start putting a focus, you're like, I want to get into cybersecurity. I like Linux. Yes, those are good things to marry together. You could walk into a very high-paying job. If you understand Linux intrusion detection, incident response, and forensics, you become extremely valuable, much more than someone focusing on Windows. That's my advice.
Love it. Love
It's
it.
also it's kind of like the reverse of saturation because there's so much abundant opportunity at this point. And you were talking about the UI and Ryan was complimenting it, and you said something that was really interesting to me because it's about making it easy to use, but also the back end is very powerful to be able to do all the detections and everything. And as a UX designer myself and a marketer myself, this was something that it basically I don't know if you could tell, but as soon as you said it, I was just smiling because it's like that's exactly. Thank you. Because a lot of people don't look at the fact that the front end is just as important as the back end. The back end needs to do everything, but if people are not going to enjoy using it or not going to do it very efficiently, it's not going to do the back end work as well. So I really like the fact that Sandfly takes that in consideration.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. I'll pass that on.
And also, I think it's time. It's time in the show. It's time in the interview. We're going to talk about AI. Everybody,
of course we are, Michael. Every show you got to bring this up.
I'm not really here, by the way. I'm actually in the Bahamas. I'm having my AR avatar.
It's Ryan's fault.
Yeah.
So we've been covering AI a lot on this show, and
I'm sorry.
We're sorry, and you're welcome. And it continues to emerge as like the next big technology, even though it's already been a technological breakthrough for a long time. It's still continuing to grow. What kind of threats does AI now add into the landscape? And how is Sandfly planning to incorporate AI and overcome these threats?
I think we've been seeing AI being used to make a lot of phishing campaigns a lot more professional, right? Like I said, it's no more broken English from the Nigerian prince. It is, pretty sophisticated. You're not going to find typos. We've had also at our company, we've had emails show up claiming they're be from me, right, to our employees saying, hey, contact me. It's an emergency on this phone number and stuff like that. So you're starting to get more sophisticated. Obviously, the voice cloning is a really, really big problem. I was just calling my bank the other day. They're like, hey, I'm going to send you over to your voice verification prompt. And I was like, I would wonder if the AI voice cloning would bypass this. Right. You know what I mean? So you're starting to think about that, or just scams in general.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of that. So on the hacking side of things, I've seen some buzz around some exploits. I don't know if it's quite there yet. I think that the AI tools have been useful in some regards for some malware analysis. The thing with the LLMs that I've seen so far is you have to know what question to ask, and they could give very confident wrong answers. Right. So if you know what questions to ask, you kind of know what the answer is, they could be helpful. So for instance, we've used some of our Linux forensics data to pass in some AI LLMs, and some of them are pretty good. Almost like call them like a junior analyst, but you really need to know what questions to ask. So I still think they need a bit of assistance in terms of the prompting, is to say, well, look at this and have you consider this? And they could sometimes glean something that you might have missed. Like, for instance, well, this date indicates something that happened 13 days ago, but this other date here says it happened now. Why is this discrepancy there? And that's, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. The malware messed up. They got their time stamp that they tried to do was wrong. So there are little things like that I think they're really useful. So I think they can make, if you're good at your job, I think they can make you better if you know what to ask for. But I don't think they're going to turn a junior person into an expert malware developer, for instance. But definitely the AI is definitely being used by attackers to improve a lot of mundane type phishing activities and things like that. So I think we're going to see, at least that's a low bar right now, but they might get more sophisticated over time. So we'll have to see where it all goes.
I watched this. This is obviously just a more of a scammy thing than an intrusion thing, but I watched this one that blew me away. It was a YouTube video. It was live stream. It was live chat going. It was on a well-known channel that had been hijacked, and it was Elon Musk live talking to fans, and he was telling them that, hey, I really want people to get into cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is the next big thing. So if you send me, I don't know, 1 Ethereum, I'm going to send you 20 back. It was that type of scam.
Yeah.
And he's talking, and normally AI has a lot of inconsistencies in the facial features or the voices or things, but Elon's been on so many shows, been on so many interviews, so much video that this AI was perfect. It looked just like there was nothing that told me this was AI generated, except for the fact it was too good to be true. That's how I knew it was a scam, was it was too good to be true. But otherwise, they had the full fake chat going where, oh, I got mine, and all of this stuff building the hype. And I started thinking, the sophistication of these hacks now utilizing AI is incredible. We talked about the voice, just taking your voice clips and being able to pretend they're your kids or a family member. Hey, I'm hurt or I'm being arrested. I need $500, and you're on the phone live with your kid, and it sounds like your kid, and you're freaking out, of course, because it's your child, and they're saying they need this money right away. There's all of these things. Of course, usually that sense of urgency and stuff is a first clue that it's just going to make these attacks so much more sophisticated. And in the industry I work in, my career started to go towards AI, and I mess with it a lot these days. But I quickly realized I need to go into cybersecurity because this is going to be a disaster. What's coming down the pipeline is going to be just things we've never seen before, because when you combine, in my mind, the amount of data that's been taken from us, the data breaches, the amount of information that's been collected with AI, you've got the perfect storm for people being no longer, like you said, able to easily detect, oh, the person's grammar is bad or whatever. It is now going to feel as real as if your family member is literally on the phone with you talking, and they're going to have details about you that only a family member should know. And that's where it starts getting really scary in my mind.
Yeah, we talked before about how I would strongly urge you to have a password set up with your family that, if you're getting a phone call or a voice call that sounds odd, you should be asking them what this password is, and they should be telling it to you. And I've instructed my family members about it already. It just is, it's something that's going to happen. The other thing you could do too is to go into some of these systems and just ask what it knows about you. And, you might be interested to see what it knows about your family and this and that. We talked about this before with the social media. I just encourage people to share less, right? Mark Zuckerberg doesn't need to know anything more about you, right? It's hard to avoid all this stuff. It's just, I remember years ago when they were, Facebook introduced the tagging that many years ago now. And, the photographic tagging, people thought how awesome it is, but really, they're like, I would tag my own face. I don't use Facebook anymore. I've been off Facebook for over a decade now, but I would tag it as different random people. I didn't want to train their algorithms. But the thing is, everyone's training all these faces, but they're like, well, it's only for your photos. Well, he didn't say that. It could be if you're in a restaurant, someone takes a photo and you're in the background, even though they took it for their Facebook feed, they're going to show who they know, but that doesn't mean Zuckerberg hasn't seen you in the background and tagged you as being in that location.
Yeah.
And now
you're training on that.
Yeah. So, I don't know how to avoid it now other than wear a mask around and look like a weirdo, but it's
dress up like a ninja.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. AI systems, I have everything from your biometrics to all your personal details. And it is a scary environment. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, now it's kind of normal to wear a mask for like sicknesses and stuff. So you can just do that all the time.
That's true.
They've got AI that can detect past that. They can look at your eyes and be able to determine who you are, just your irises itself. So
okay. That's a bummer.
You have to wear a full face mask, Michael, a full on face mask.
Yeah. Oh, I get to wear a balaclava? Awesome.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you want.
There you go.
Be like a ninja.
I'll remind you, don't forget that your ear is actually as unique as your fingerprint. So even your ear showing through a mask could be enough that they might be able to see you.
Come on.
Yeah, sad to say. Sad to say. Oh, you're cooked no matter what you do.
So our beloved Linux controls the world. The penguins are marching. We're in all the things. We're on the cloud, containers, embedded systems, on the internet. So how does Sandfly adapt to such a diverse ecosystem? And what's the trickiest environment you've had to tackle so far?
The main thing we do is, because we're not tying into the kernel, it saves a ton of grief. And even people like use eBPF.
Nice.
eBPF does not solve the problem. It's like it shifts it around a bit. It's still the same. You still are vulnerable to causing system performance and crashing things. So the biggest thing why we don't have compatibility issues is, first of all, we're not tying into the kernel. We're not sweeping the memory. We're not doing anything that could cause the system to tip over. We're just known as a company that we don't tip systems over. This is what we're known for. Second thing is we use a memory safe programming language, Golang, which is
nice.
It was designed by Google. and it is just phenomenal. We never get any type of issues with it. It's garbage collected. We don't have any memory issues. We're not going to have to worry about overflows, all this other stuff that you typically see. So the other thing we do is we just try to maintain, when we're on a system, we don't do anything tricky. We try to maintain read-only operations. There's no direct way to have our code run something on the remote system. We're there to read, and we don't write anything. We're not trying to change the system around. So I think all these things kind of add together to something that's really allows us to work on, like I said, really like crazy stuff, like everything from we could work on software defined radios at the cameras up to the same product, watch all these things. You're talking about that hack earlier with the telcos. They were getting into edge devices, a lot of which run Linux, and we could get on a lot of these edge devices. So it just comes down to having that safety allows us to get in all these places without I call it no drama Linux security. That's like one of my life mottos is no drama. Like, I don't want you in my life causing drama, right? so it's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing here, man. We just, we're like no drama Linux security. I think we're able to do that because of how we work.
Yeah. I just don't know. How do I know if it's working if I don't have this thing popping up every 5 seconds telling me that it's collecting malware and it's protecting me, and resubscribe and get another subscription and your time's almost up and add this feature? And have you ever used these recent ones? Oh my gosh, they're so bad.
Don't forget the big scan that happens at 10 a.m. in the middle of your most important call of the day. Don't forget that one.
Like some of the software that is supposed to protect you is worse than a virus.
It definitely is.
So, being in this field, I know you've seen some things, and I just want to try to get you to give us one of the most sneakiest or creative Linux specific attacks that you've either experienced and worked on yourself, or that you've just seen in the wild so far.
And preferably something that's already been patched.
Yeah. Yeah. That the thing is, so it's like we get asked all the time about Linux stealth rootkits. I actually think they're all junk. They're just junk, but it's marketing and people want to think about it. The best things I see are guys who are using living off the land commands on the Linux system to hide. And I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me here, but there was a rootkit that was 100% living off the land. It hid under the proc file system. So, on Linux, they have proc, PROC, where it lists all the processes. So that's a virtual file system. But what this guy did is he would unmount that file system, copy over his binaries onto the file system underneath, and remount proc on top. So now when he went to go look for the binaries, it was just a proc file system. You couldn't see them. Now they were still running right on the system. And so he had, using living off the land, he had a backdoor that was watching your log files. And if you hit it with certain keys, it would activate through the SSH. It would see certain attempts to log in, it would activate. I had log cleaners on it. It had a hidden process that was running. It could hide files that were in directories. So I think it's pretty good. I like guys and malware that are using simple tactics in a very clever way. I don't like complicated malware. It's all junk. They have bugs, they get noticed, they mess things up. The more features you add to them, the worse they get. So I just like really simple, purpose-built malware, or purpose-built like living off the land stuff. So I say the sneakiest stuff is not what most people think is sneaky. The sneakiest stuff are people who are just using built-in stuff in a very clever way.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. Or like I said, very simple. Like we wrote a big report up on the BPF door, which is a piece of a suspected Chinese backdoor. It was great because it had a simple magic packet to activate. It hid in a very kind of nonchalant, way that was good enough. It just did one thing, and then that's it. And it was small, so stuff like that, that's simple is good. Complicated is go away. Yep. So what's sneakiest? Sneakiest is simple. That's
interesting. I love it.
It's also interesting to see like the cybersecurity aspects of like people who are into cybersecurity can, like respect the effort involved in doing something horrible.
You have to.
Yeah. Because it's like there's so many, like it's like the XZ thing. Like it was so far deep in that, like the way they got access was not that clever, but the way they were doing it was clever, and how they buried it inside of stuff. Like, that stuff is interesting.
Yeah, no,
And
I mean
horrible,
that was
but interesting.
look, it was an awesome hack. Look, I'll read hacks today, and I'd still laugh out loud if someone does something really good, you know. So, I'm like, hey man, props to them, man. I wish I'd done that, right? So, yeah, it's the same. Like the XZ hack was clever because those guys are just like, we're just going to shove a backdoor in the middle of one of the most popular compression algorithms and not let anyone see it. I'm like, awesome. Right. And they almost got away with it. Right. But also at the same time, it reflects to how badly a lot of these open source maintainers are treated. Because I used to maintain open source software. I have software that's still like, I wrote the original versions of LogCheck and Logtail, which are now in every Debian distro and stuff like that, right? But the thing is, it's like these guys, it's like that cartoon where they show the whole internet, this one guy in Minnesota maintaining that critical piece of software, the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like the maintainer XZ got such grief. I'm like, how much money did you guys ever give this guy? Did you ever support him?
Exactly.
Did you ever offer any help?
Yeah.
So these open source authors are under tremendous pressure. A lot of times they're doing something well past the point that they like doing it anymore. And it's a risk.
It was a thankless job a lot of the times. Yeah.
Of course it is about the fact that, you get people who are using stuff for free and they complain. A lot of these are very big companies using stuff for free, like in major project. They won't even throw these guys $50, right? It's kind of pathetic. What we do as a company, we do donate to some of these projects just because we've been on the receiving end. And it's just like, I would encourage companies that are listening to this, to support these guys because, it's a thankless job. It's a thankless job. Yeah.
That's awesome that you're doing that. And also, Sandfly's mission is all about catching intruders and responding to the incidents. I'm curious if you have one you can share with us. What's the most dramatic success story that you can share without like naming names or anything? Like where Sandfly saved the day for a Linux deployment?
Probably, I think when the Log4j stuff happened, we were called out in incident response situations for customers, and that they, and that happened over the Christmas break. I think they were quite happy to have us able to come in on the holiday or have our product help them through the holidays. So that affected a bunch of different people. And again, that wasn't a Linux specific the software, but it was executing things that were right. So it was we were able to help with some of that. Other customers have just been using our SSH key tracking because they initially thought they wanted us for EDR, but then we found their SSH enterprise was a mess. And so they were using us to help clean that up. And they're like, we had no idea we had all these old keys. We had employees that still would have had access, maybe still didn't have access. They didn't know. So we kind of find these things going on. And then we've also had proof of concepts. We're in the middle of the proof of concept. I'm looking and we're looking at a result. I'm like, yeah, man, that's BPF door on that system right now. So like we find active malware, active compromises on systems sometimes, even during a POC. So these have all been kind of things where I think the customers have really appreciated it. Again, because I get back to a very limited number of Linux people having to watch a very large number of systems. And even if you got someone like me on your team, it's like, I can't scale. Right. The worst the worst I heard once was 3 people had to watch 100,000 Linux VMs. It's a completely unscalable problem, right? It's impossible. So, I mean, you got to automate it. So in these situations, we're viewed, pretty favorably because we could just come in and rip through systems very quickly and get a line on what's going on. So, is it saved a day? Well, I don't know. Probably saved a lot of grief and aggravation. Yeah, certainly.
Got people back to Christmas, which is very important. Got them back to their families.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, have you ever used drift detection to help catch the family with Dominic Toretto and the other Furious?
Why are you bringing a stupid Furious 5 movie reference? Michael, you're banned. Mute.
I know. This is me going to be totally clueless because I'm totally disconnected from pop culture now. So I'll act like, oh wait, that was a great movie.
Stay there.
Am I supposed to say that?
Place to be.
No, it's a terrible movie that's fun, I guess is the way to say it.
Well, Craig, you've made it to the end of the main part of the interview. Congratulations.
Right. Thank you for having me.
No, you're fantastic. I could talk with you for hours.
Oh, great. I appreciate that. Same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been amazing, but unfortunately, you just made it through the gauntlet. Now you've got the
Yeah.
lightning round, which is generally another
Right.
45 minutes of questions. No, I'm kidding. We're going to do a quick lightning round with you. And
Right.
really, this is meant for fun. So we're going to ask you a question. First thing that comes to mind, shoot it out. And you can't change your answer, though. So if you shoot
All
out
right, I'm ready.
something that
I'm
you wish
warming
to
up.
take back,
I'm
too
warming up.
bad. All right.
Warming up.
Here we go. Lightning round begins now, and I'm going to kick us off. Your favorite candy bar?
Stickers.
Nice, good one.
Nice. The best hacker movie.
War games.
Nice.
Favorite Linux distro?
No
Can't
comment.
really answer that one.
No comment.
Best
We tried.
music genre or song to ethically hack to?
Oh, geez. Probably. I'll go back to 90s. Prodigy.
Wow.
Good one.
Nice.
Prodigy's awesome.
Nice.
90s Prodigy. Yeah.
Nice.
Or,
so this is probably
or Rachmaninoff. It depends on my mood. Rachmaninoff if I'm deep thinking. Prodigy.
that is an interesting
Prodigy.
dichotomy there.
If you're just coming in to wreck the place, Prodigy.
I can hear the song in my head right now.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
doing it.
If you're just coming in to burn the village, you want Prodigy.
Yeah. A lot of smacking to do there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is a very important one. If you could only choose one, you can't. It doesn't matter what flavor of either, but if you only choose one, cupcakes or muffins.
Cupcakes.
Unfortunately, that's the wrong answer.
You know, that's what all cybersecurity enthusiasts and geniuses say, Michael. That is the correct answer. Obviously.
Are.
I mean,
That is
they're
true.
they're basically the same thing. Just one is icing on top, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
muffin's
yeah.
just an ugly cupcake, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being attacked now.
What company creates a dedicated and reliable Linux security solution that works across all systems without endpoint agents or drama?
Sandfly.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Look, I'm so excited about not only this interview and our audience hearing it, but our partnership with Sandfly, because there's so much security stuff that goes on in the news. And now we have someone we can go to when these news segments happen too and be like, hey, what's really happening here? What's going on behind the scenes here? In fact, we talked about early on, we want to have you all on. And hopefully it never happens. But if there is another epic hack, which does happen, you know, at least a couple times a year usually, have you all on to kind of discuss it. And
Hopefully
and
it never happens, but at least a couple times a year.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, and at least arm people with the information of how they can avoid it and things. And I also want to thank you for giving our audience. We didn't even know about that until today, that you guys were going to give a coupon code to our audience specifically. So Destination 50, and that gets you 10 hosts for people who want to use the home user edition. Of course, we have a lot of professionals listening in our audience as well. So check out Sandfly for your enterprise. But most importantly, you did an amazing interview, Craig. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for all you do for Linux and everything you've done for Destination Linux too. We appreciate Sandfly so much.
I appreciate it, guys. I love your show, so I'm happy to be on here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And also the amount of sound bites you have provided for content is so good.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have him all over social media to his joy.
Yeah. Well,
You could probably make a video for each question, you know?
Yeah. Well, they let me know. Sometimes I say stuff I regret later, but hopefully this one went all right.
Oh, I think it went good.
I
think it went
didn't tell you what
fantastic.
distro I use, so I think I kept my mouth shut about that.
You
Yes.
did good. You even kept
You
it
did.
shut on the lightning round, which is
Yeah.
We tried to sneak it in there to see what
We
happened.
try to get him on another angle of just tell us your favorite.
Yeah.
You know?
I might change, even if I told you. It's just you guys know how it goes, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're all professional distro
that's it.
hoppers. We
Get
know.
everything set up perfectly. Oh, time to change. So there you go.
Exactly. Yeah,
But I've
I was
been on
just
it for
thinking
35
that
minutes, and that's too
today.
much.
I booted
Yeah.
up my machine and I was like, I think I'm going to change distros again. So look at that
For sure.
feeling.
Yeah.
So if you want to come hang out with Jill this year, you need to go check out Scale 22X. The 22nd annual Southern California Linux Expo will take place on March 6th through the 9th, 2025. This year. That's this year. At the Pasadena Convention Center in
Pasadena,
Pasadena,
There you
California.
go. You can meet Jill.
week,
Come
in fact.
spin the Linux Chicks LA Wheel O Swag for a surprise at the Linux Chicks LA booth number 218. And you can use Chicks, the code Chicks, CHIX, for 50% off your scale registration there. We got all kinds of coupons on this episode. This is a coupon
we sure
episode.
do.
All kinds of discounts.
We're like a deal site for them.
Yeah, we're like slick deals over here for Linux. I'm telling you what, it's incredible.
I couldn't even think of one, and I was like, a deal site.
Yeah. If you want to find Jill in the crowd, just look for the penguin hat, and she actually wears that the whole time.
Yes.
So you'll be able to find her there, and also Jill may be doing some content for us there at the show. We haven't fully figured it all out, but we may have.
We haven't trapped her into agreeing yet, but we will. Don't worry.
I kind of just did now. Like she kind of has to now because I mentioned it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the tactic of recording.
They'll come from scale. And Michael and I will be, if you want to meet us,
going to that.
We're not going to that one, but we're going to be
sad.
at the Red Hat Summit.
Yeah.
That's right. Red Hat Summit in May, which is in Boston.
Boston. You got to say Boston.
Boston.
We're going to get in the car and go to Boston.
In the car, get some coffee and go Boston. That's what we're going to do. So you're going to come hang out with us in Boston. So you're going to have to go. If you want to see all of us, you're going to have to go separate places in the United States. It's worth it.
The complete opposite sides of the country, too.
Yeah, it's the complete opposite side. You're welcome. You can do a whole little tour on your way into seeing.
This is for you to have a good traveling experience.
We did this for you. A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces. And this episode has so much to discuss and talk about. So many things that we can pontificate upon as a community. And that word came out of nowhere. I did not expect
interesting.
That yeah.
Pontificate.
Join us in our Discord. Go to tuxdigital.com/Discord. Join the discussion. And Michael, there's some other things people can do too, because they love this show so much. They're going to want to support it.
If you love this show so much that you want to support it, you can go to tuxdigital.com/membership and get access to a bunch of cool stuff. You become a patron and you get the access to watch the show live, you get access to unedited episodes, access to the patron section only for the Discord server. So you can join us in the live stream and also join us in the patron only post show that happens every week after the show, and so much more. We have tons of stuff. And if you become a patron of Tux Digital, it's not just Destination Linux. You also get stuff for This Week in Linux and more. So tuxdigital.com/membership. And something else you can get is merch discounts. That's right. We have merch at tuxdigital.com/store. So you can get hats, mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, all sorts of stuff. tuxdigital.com/store. And if you become a patron, you get discounts at the store. So much stuff to get there. And there's so many things that I can't even think of. And we actually have some more coming that people have requested specifically. So including mouse pads. Yes. For the people who sent the message in. Yes, mouse pads.
Not a Bucky's travel mug, but a Destination Linux
you don't
one.
Sell those?
Definitely not what Ryan holds up ever.
And make sure to check out all the awesome shows here on Tux Digital. That's right. We have an entire network of shows to fill your whole week with geeky goodness. Head to tuxdigital.com to keep those Linux penguins marching.
And if you want to marinate on some more content and pontificate on some more things, be sure to join us in the Discord server. I just wanted to say marinate for no reason.
And pontificate.
And pontificate, exactly. Everybody have a great week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Yeah. Pontificate on that, people. We say it every week, but really pontificate on what that means.
Let that marinate for a second.
Yeah. Think outside the box.
We love all our viewers.
Most of them.
Contemplate what that means.
Most of them. you know how ugly it is that we say that? I can't believe you came up with that, Michael, that most of them thing.
That was not me. Not me.
That's so
you have like an instinct to come up with things like that. which I respect, in fact. Because it is 100% not everyone. It is most of you.
There are some people that send some nasty emails, and you know who you are.
Yeah.
And we do not tidy whities eating your Cheetos. You know, we you know who you are. We don't like you.
Yeah. We know who you are. We don't care about you. So that's why we make sure it's not everybody.
Little Cheeto stains on your whitey tidies. Your little emails you send talking about how much you hate us.
Thanks for watching this show, everybody. We'll see you next week.